everybody. Now, we're dealing with a power title here, and it's exciting. What a promise. Divorce, soulmate conflict, fix a marriage, find a soulmate. This is all big, and the Kabbalah guarantees this. I was quite taken aback when they say within 40 days. Now, why 40 days? 40 days is because Moses was up on the mountain to receive the Torah, and he was there for 40 days. And then he saw the people in trouble. He goes up again, and it takes another 40 days to straighten things out. Well, the last one was conflict. Conflict resolution, that's obvious. But where's the connection? Because it's the marriage between Israel and Hashem. And so the whole idea is this is a wedding. This is a bride and a groom. So the Kabbalah finds it very, very significant, these main points to bring out. Of course, we have to believe that it's not magic. We have to really work on it. And if we follow carefully, and I'm going to give you advice, and later on you'll have the recording, and also we're going to have a video with subtitles, so you'll also have it in writing. Eventually a book is coming out as well. Now, the first rule is treat your wife like Cinderella. After all, she's a princess. When she was a little girl, her mother, her father, her grandfather always treated her like a princess, always brought her dresses, and she felt that way. And they all loved Cinderella because they, it's a dream of a prince coming and taking them off to a new life. And this is their dream. And when the girls grow up, it's still the same. And one proof is that when they get married, they're dressed in a Cinderella princess's dress. So, and you're standing there, you're the groom. Now, what is a groom? A groom is someone who is the lowest level of servant in a stately home. A groom grooms the horses. And he grooms the horses, and then he has to saddle them up. And when the princess is ready to go in the carriage, he has to take her and guide it and look after her and really, really be careful for her and with her 24 hours 7. And that's exactly what she's dreaming of. But you say, hey, wait a minute, this is one-sided. But not really, because you remember life is like a mirror. It's always like this. If you look in that mirror and you look at yourself and you say, and she looks at you through that mirror as well. If you treat her as number 1 and you're number 2, then naturally she will treat you as number 1 and she'll be number 2. In other words, it's a mutual relationship. Now, don't get worried about it, because women, they are emotional, and women feel with all their heart, their soul, their might. They feel with their whole body, unlike men. And therefore, if they've got this feeling that she's loved 24 hours 7, she's looked after, she's treated like a princess, then it keeps the marriage alive. And of course, it's very much connected with the relationship on a day-to-day basis. A lot of men said, yes, it's all very well, but she's very high maintenance. Well, if you've got a valuable antique car that costs a fortune, high maintenance, you have to look after it. You have to watch, and you watch out for every little scratch or dent. And you're treating it almost like a princess, very high maintenance. But the value you get in return is fantastic. And it's exactly the same thing here. It's exactly the same. And each one of us has to bear this in mind all of the time. If you don't keep repeating your love, then it will fade. It'll wane. And therefore you have to build yourself up with her. The next one, which is very important, is negativity. Now, you have to be careful. You have to seek changes. You have to notice what's going on. She doesn't feel good. She feels negative. She doesn't feel comfortable. And then, or you have to look after her. She might be wearing new clothes. And she wants you to see it. She wants you to recognize it. men like that as well. Oh, I like your new coat, and oh, you went to the hairdresser. But it's not that. She wants to be noticed because otherwise it fades. I said to you before, high maintenance. That means it will only last a few hours. So you have to keep reiterating and saying it again and again and again. You come down to breakfast. So what a lot of people do, they sit down, take out their mobile phone, look at a newspaper, concentrate on the eating, talk to a friend, watch television or the computer, divert themselves to other things and not to her. You have to put away the phone. You have to close everything. You tell a friend, I'll call you later. Why? Because this is value time only with her. And she'll feel good about it. Because she wants to feel that you're everything in her life. Now, when we were courting in the early days, so what did you do? You treated her like a princess. You couldn't get her out of your mind. You kept on calling her all day. You even found a way to trick on your appointment schedule and invite her out for a meal, for a drink. And that's, you concentrated it just on her. And she felt it and she appreciated it. And why? Because you're renewing all the time. Talk to her on the phone regularly throughout the day and say, hey, I miss you. I want to get home, but I got to do work. And you have to show this warmth all the time. This warmth and affection keeps it alive. However, on the other thing, we have to think that the next major point is that you have to have fun. Your marriage is fun. It's very interesting. Sexual relationships in marriage doesn't have a blessing, doesn't have a bracha. Why? It's a bracha in of itself. So the more fun, the more happy you are, the more you satisfy each other's needs, the more you have joy, the more you experiment. And you're advised in the Gemara, in the Talmud, you should do that. You should tell each other your needs. And then they know. And they tell them their likes and dislikes. And you have to share it. Why? Because everything you do becomes a bigger bracha, a much, much bigger blessing. Now, the next important part of this is that you have to paint a picture, a dream. Can you see the soul shining through? That's the question. Now look in the mirror and test yourself. Does it fit your dream? After all, you are worried about how she looks. And you want her, of course, to look beautiful and attractive. But there's all sorts of other things within her soul. The test is to be able to see her soul. And she must see your soul. Who you are, yes, beautiful and attractive, but not necessarily completely so. The main thing is the person, the personality. We're told a nice story of the Alshich, who was a famous Kabbalistic writer, a real sage. And from a young age, he studied Kabbalah day and night, all through the night. And he really, everything he chased after, he was always hungry. And every night, his wife would bring a cup of tea every now and again, very quietly, not to disturb him, put it on the table and go away. Unfortunately, she died at a young age. And so his mother continued it because she wanted him to learn. And it was important to him. But it was a major effort. She couldn't keep it up for long. But every night, during the night, she would make sure he has a tea there all the time, and he can go through and maybe a little snack, and he should not be disturbed. It was too much for her. She asked for the neighbor's daughter to come in and help out. He says, look, you mustn't talk. You must be very quiet. He mustn't notice you. You come in, you put the tea on the table, you go out, and about an hour or two later, you bring another one. So he is not disturbed. He concentrates on his learning. Well, one early morning, he looks at the table and there's 2 cups. So he goes straight away to his mother and says, tell me, when you did it, did you put 2 cups on the table? She says, no, always one, after all. So he ran round to the house of this girl, just a neighbor, and he said to the father, I want to speak to your daughter. Well, the father agreed, knew who he was, and he said to her, tell me, why did you put 2 cups of tea? So she says, I saw you were learning with Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi. So obviously I put 2 cups. See, he says, will you marry me? Of course she agreed. Because he saw what soul she was. He had to make sure she was attractive, yes. But on the other hand, here was the real soul inside. And I think I told you this story with our son. In North Tel Aviv, a completely irreligious family, left wing, and everything that comes with it. And he invited us over to meet the girl and her parents because they wanted to get married. So we sat with the mother, we sat with the parents, we sat with the daughter, we had long chats with them, and I couldn't see the neshama, neither could my wife. There was nothing shining through. It was sort of, I don't know, cold. And so my son afterwards came and says, well, what do you think? So we both said to him, look here, she's a nice girl, she's pretty, but look at your mother, look at your sisters, and tell me, do you see their soul? Look at her again. Do you see her soul? And of course he was upset with us, but the next morning he fired her because he thought it through. And you have to realize this is somebody you want to get old with. And when you look at somebody, you've got to think, do I want to get old with that person? Now, and normally one doesn't get married unless one goes out with the girl several times and sees her face, sees what she looks like. And I have to tell you this again, because this is spaced repetition. This is self-hypnosis. I'm trying to drive a point home. I'm trying to get you internalize it. Because when you look for your daughter or your son or yourself or a member of the family and you want to find a soulmate, how do you identify that soulmate? It has to be automatic. It has to be part of you, so internalized, just like a pilot in learning to fly, he repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats hundreds of times. Over 10,000 times, by the way, because that's the tipping point where it becomes part of him. And after a time, he's a machine. He's a robot. He's part of the plane. He doesn't think, he does everything automatic. And we also have to be on automatic. Because when we have that automatic trigger, it is necessary to take a story and keep embedding it, because that is self-hypnosis. And the story I told the other day is so powerful, but it means a lot. Here is a young man who is also goes after every Kabbalist to hear their talks, and he wants to learn. He's always hungry. And he went to the synagogue one day, and the place was packed. This famous Kabbalist answering questions. And sometimes he stumbled. So he noticed there was a little note coming down from the ladies' gallery, and he'd pick it up, and then he'd give the answer. And he saw this happen so many times. He went to the rabbi and said, look, I saw your daughter is a very good, clever girl, and she writes these notes. You know, I'd like to meet her. So the rabbi says, look, on one condition, you can't do what one normally does and go out with her. Normally, you're not allowed to get married unless you've seen her beforehand, at least a few times, at least. Because you know everything about her, your parents have checked her out, and those are the long-lasting marriages, because you know who you're dealing with. And he said, okay, I'll take the condition. Then come next week to our house. And he couldn't get her out of his mind. He was already in love with her. Why? Because of her personality, because of her knowledge. This was a real soulmate for him. And so they met. And he didn't see her. She was covered with a veil. And he agreed to get married. And after they got married, she said, now I've got a condition. You mustn't see me till tomorrow morning. I'm your wife. I want you to have normal relationships with me. I want a son from you. And then you'll decide. So he agreed. And that night they were together. The next morning, he took a look at her and he had the shock of his life. He let out a scream. And he started to pack and go. Because her face was a combination of a human face and an ox's face. Now, we're told in the Talmud, it's a midrash actually, that if a woman is gored by an ox, then, and the baby is subsequently born, but brought on very early, then that baby will be affected. You remember with with Yaakov, and the sticks he used, he managed to get spotted sheep. When his wages were black spots, he got it. And then when it was wages were white spots, he changed it over. So he became very wealthy through this. So it can be done and it's true. But of course what happens is they are liable and they have to pay very large compensation to her. And that's what happened to her, unfortunately. He packed up and left. Now, according to Jewish law, if you hadn't seen the person and you really thought they were beautiful and it was false pretenses, this fact was hidden from you, then the marriage is annulled. And he went off and he traveled around the world to try and find a soulmate, try to find his life. And he arrived in Istanbul. And Istanbul, famous Kabbalist, and he married a girl there where he did find her soul. And they had a lovely life. After 15 years, she passed away. On the day of the funeral, his son, who had been nagging his mother all the time, tell me, why haven't I got a father like everyone else? And by the way, this son was on the same level as the father. Absolutely. And she told him the whole story. He says, that's impossible. I got used to your face. I love it. It's you. It's your personality. Anyway, he nagged and nagged. Eventually, she had no choice but to let him go. And he wandered from land to land. On the day of the rabbi's funeral, he came to town and he sees the funeral. And he asks, whose funeral? Well, it's the rabbi's daughter. He's that famous Kabbalist. I wanted to see him. Maybe he'll give me good advice. She went to see him. And he said, and the rabbi looked at him and started to cry. He says, why are you crying? I came to ask, are you crying because of my story? Sure, it's sad. But are you coming? Why are you crying? He says, because you're my son. He embraced him, he was happy, and he persuaded him to stay a month, and then another month. And after a year, his son said, look, I've got to go back to my mother. She's alone. It's not fair. It's not right. Come with me. Absolutely not. He refused to go. He says, I won't be able to take it. So anyway, after 2 years waiting, in the middle of the night, he packed his bag and he left because he didn't want his father to chase after him. He had to leave. As soon as he left, the father made inquiries and he's gone. Where else would he go? He said he's going to his mother. So the boy got back and he was in the forest near his mother's home and he sat down and cried. He says, Hashem, help me. What am I going to do? I'm coming there and I promised her. And suddenly a non-Jewish peddler tapped him on the shoulder and said, why are you crying? So he told him the story. He says, look, I've got this special spray. I want you, it's a very nice perfume. Take it to your mother. So, and tell her where it came from. And take this mirror with as well. So he did. And he went back to the mother, and the mother smelt it. Very, very nice. And then she took it in the hand, as he had instructed to do, and wiped it all over her face. And now she looked in the mirror. She was absolutely beautiful. Her face had gone back to normal. Well, when the rabbi arrived and this Beautiful woman opens the door. Of course, he's excited. And then she tells him who she really is. And, of course, they get remarried because he'd gone back to his real soul mate. Now, you can have two soulmates. His first wife remains his soulmate. But that doesn't mean to say that the love and the connection with the new soulmate is going to be any less. Now, we have to remember this in our daily lives as well. My mother did a wonderful thing. She got remarried at the age of 90, if you please. But she says, you know, I love you, but I also love this man I'm going to marry. But it hasn't changed and there'll be no difference for you. You don't have to give him honor if you don't want to. And that's it. She also did the same with our sister-in-law. My brother died very young, the age of 39. And he left 2 children. And she was alone. My mother took it in and said, listen, you're now our daughter and sister. You go find a husband. You find a husband, he will be treated as our son-in-law. And it really was like that. Fantastic relationships. The children they had, we were their uncle and aunt. They were not uncle and aunt, actually grandparents. And they still treat us like that today. So this is a beautiful thing and something one should never forget, because sometimes one is faced with this problem in life. Now, the next one is, we all need, what is the need? What is the need when it comes to painting that picture, that dream? And you're asked to look in the mirror, and you're asked to say, wait a minute, how do I look? And you have to try to make sure that you also look a good soul, not necessarily handsome, although it would help. But the more important thing is a good soul. And that's the most important thing. But that also comes with need. What is the need? The need is this. We all have 2 faces. There's only language in Hebrew when you've got the inner face and the outer face, but it applies to absolutely everyone. The inner face and the outer face, the face you show to the outside world and the face you have inside in your heart and in your soul. And you're told, don't talk to anybody, don't show what's inside. Especially, you remember with the prayer, you can get angry, but you have to be silent. Don't show your anger. Don't show how you feel. That's got to stay inside. And you might be sinning, because if you treat anybody like that, especially your spouse, that's not a good thing at all. So you keep it inside of you, and you have to have it inside your soul. But the outside world, you say, wait a minute, I can't put on a false face. I can't show a face which is a tzaddik, a righteous person, and inside I'm not. Rambam says, oh no. Rambam says, one of the principles is, tocho kvaro. The inside becomes like the outside. Don't wait. A lot of people say, look, how can I become religious? I'm not there yet. He said, look, you know what? You start and gradually it become part of you. Tocho kvaro. And that's what we have to work on. That's very, very important. Now, another thing which has to be added on to this is the big problem world Platonic. What does it mean, Platonic, in today's age? In fact, not so long ago either. Platonic is, we have that relationship which is very close. We might sleep together and we live together, but it's not, I'm not in love. It's only Platonic and it's not there permanently. It's good for me at the moment. Now, many people live together and they do have that Platonic relationship. And that Platonic relationship can be very dangerous. Why? Because you don't need a friend. What for? You've got everything you want there without any of the responsibilities or liabilities. You won't have children because you have to show them your parents, and you can't live 2 lives. You want to bring them up on a good moral standard. But many, many people unfortunately suffer from the plague of single mothers. It's something that is more than 50% of the population in most of the Western countries. Single mothers. Now this is a tragedy, because what happens is they call it marriage, because when you live together it's called marriage. They married love. They didn't marry a friend, a partner, somebody they want to get old with. They didn't do that at all. What they did was, by mistake or by accident, they became parents. And the husband sees the kids getting much more attention, because men are very touchy, got an ego problem, and they don't understand. That's why I said you've got to be frank and open with each other. I'm not feeling well. Forgive me. This is not my time. I've got pains. I'm under tension. Please give me space. And you must give her that space, because you must understand it can sometimes be a painful thing and make her very nervous. So then you realize, hey, wait a minute. She still loves me. It's nothing to do with that. It's because she has this problem, so I have to give her space. And that is very, very important in that relationship. But what does a child do? A child makes you into parents. Now, children are very, very smart, even little kids. They sense many, many times that you're living two lives. Do what I say, and I will do what I do. It's a conflict. And the last thing you want to do is to bring up your child to have that attitude in life. But even worse, and I've seen it so many times, and that is one of the big causes of single marriages. And many people come to me and discuss this problem. What's the big problem with single marriages? They don't want to repeat the mistake their parents made. Of course, it doesn't make much difference, because you can find your soulmate. But Hashem, he decides when you're ready for the soulmate, because that is the big thing. The relationship with Hashem. Now, Hashem knows 40 days before the woman gets pregnant and she conceives, he chooses which soulmate that child is going to have. And it's announced in heaven 40 days before. This person for this person. And now it's how it's going to be. But only Hashem knows the name. Only Hashem could identify, say, wait a minute, isn't there freedom of choice? Sure, you have freedom of choice. You can choose the right soulmate or the wrong soulmate. Sometimes you have a soulmate now, and like with that Kabbalist, the other soulmate only turns up later. After all, it happened to King David a number of times, and in the end, it was Bathsheba. And she was close to him, and she made the decisions in life. And she was the one who decided that King Solomon will reign. So she was very important in his life, but she was definitely a soulmate. The only thing is, David had miscalculated. He knew that she was a soulmate. However, he did it prematurely. He did something which legally he was entitled to do, but he shouldn't have done it. It was very, very wrong to have done it. Mainly because she'd already got pregnant. And what was the natural outcome? He was very lucky. That baby did not survive. So we have this case all over the world, because you have to be alive and you have to have dignity. And that's the next most important point to remember. You start now. And it's interesting. You say, what do you mean I start now? How can I, how can I think of him as being alive? I haven't met him yet. Or her alive, and I haven't met her yet. No, you have to imagine you're already married. You have to imagine that you have to worry about him right now and pray for him or her. Now, it's an exercise which is very powerful. Why? It makes you concentrate on reality, and you'll see why in a minute. And he might have good news, bad news, a challenge. He might have a worry. He might be looking for a job and lost a job. He might have exams, or he might have had success, or what we call failure, challenges. So what would a wife do, or a husband do, mainly a wife? She'd pray for him. And if he does well, she'll congratulate him, and she'll praise him, and she'll make him feel good, because that's what wives do. It's always a loving, caring, and sharing relationship. And you say, why start now? Because it's very important to start now, because what you've got to do is to think to yourself, why are you waiting until you change? There's many, many things in single life. You say, well, right now I'm having fun. I go to my friends. I go to concerts. I go dancing. I do all sorts of things. Of course, naturally, when I'm married, I'm not going to do these things. I'm going to behave entirely differently. So start now. Just the same as you start to be alive and you connect with that person right now, as if you're married, behave in the same way. Start changing now as if you're married. Then again, Hashem will say, now you are ready. Why? Because you're already behaving the way you should be behaving. Now I know I can bring you together, because you'll be of value to each other, because you're already there, you care about each other. And that's how Hashem works. So we have to connect ourselves to Hashem. Now, it's also very important that we have to be very frank, as I said before. We have to like, and we have many likes and dislikes, and there's times we want to be silent, but don't, please. If a husband, especially a woman, she has moods, she feels with her whole body. A man, as I said, does not. Don't show an angry face if you're angry. Don't sulk. All that is negative and only touches his ego. And it's not good for the marriage. So what happens is Hashem postpones the marriage. Now, parents have a responsibility. It's a cloning responsibility, because every child is a clone of them. They're biological parents, but it is much, much more than that. Now, there's a code embedded in the Torah, and it's giving, it's being alive, it's receiving. You remember what I told you about the 3 different types of people? That's important to remember in life, in your marriage and outside your marriage, and generally in life. There's those people who are vessels and want to give in order to receive. They're called alive and sick. Very dangerous people. You have to be very, very careful, because they only think of themselves. So take, especially in relationships. And many women have seen this in their lives, and even the men. Take. Nothing in return. That just does not work, and the marriage cannot last unless you're following all these rules, and if you follow them, then it's all part of conflict resolution, and you can sort it out. Now, why is that important? Because you could be married to your real soulmate, because Hashem let it happen. But you're married now to your soulmate, and suddenly you don't get on. You haven't followed the rules. You don't know how to handle things. There's conflict. So you want to get divorced, or you're thinking of getting divorced. You've had enough. You want to walk out, start a new life, do something else. So what happens? You don't do anything about it. But what is your job? Follow the rules in just the same way, because you want it to be resolved. You want to hold on to your soulmate. And naturally, if we think about all these rules and you follow them, then family stays together. You remember what I said? You have to reflect, connect, mind direct. And you have to think, those who breathe together, bond together, and stay together. It's the bonding that has to count. But before that, you have to really, really, really reflect very carefully, think it through. What part are you playing? What part are they playing? Where you can meet each other in the middle. Because you have to imagine you're walking along the road and there's a mirror in the middle of the road. What do you see? You see another person, which is really you, walking towards you, and you meet in the middle. And that's so important in life. Meet in the middle. And this is how you find yourself. And sometimes you can be quite surprised because you're seeing how the other person sees you, and therefore you have to fix it. And then there's the category of being alive but dead. A person only wants to receive for oneself alone. Time, money, brains, love, everything. You can't live with that person. It's impossible. You can't fix it, and you're not going to do anything about it. Yes, they can try to be a Baal Tshuva, to be a repentant, but that doesn't work in these. It's deeply embedded in them. It's their personality. And don't take a chance. Don't do what a lot of young couples do. Well, I'll ignore that and I'll ignore that. We get married, I'll change him or her. Forget it. It just doesn't work. You know why? We all revert back to type. And there's two factors in this reverting back to type. As I mentioned before, one factor is reverting back to type. We had this often with my wife, and we used to laugh a lot about this. I'd say a trigger word by accident, and I didn't know it was a trigger word, and suddenly she starts behaving like somebody in kindergarten or at home and defending herself and, and getting angry. And what did I do? And I learned to say to her, hey, which sister or aunt treated you like that? Or did your parents treat you like that? And I'd laugh. And she'd laugh as well and tell me the story. Because there's always a source to it. It's what the parents did to you when you were young. Unfortunately, they can take away a girl or a boy's confidence, a belief in themselves. And the worst thing a parent can do, they're destroying them. And unfortunately, it goes from generation to generation. It's something you can't control. And it's very, very sad. Very, very sad indeed. Now, and the third type, which is, of course, the best, and that is those who want to receive knowledge, money, love, sharing, caring, time in order to give. Only to give. And those type of people, you want to give them in return because you feel good with them. And those are the type of people who will definitely get more and more and more so they can give and share more and more and more. Those are the type of people we need to live with because it's much, much easier. And then you want to share with them. You want to give them time. You want to give them love. And this is the beautiful thing about it. There's the four senses that I want to talk about. In the four senses, you have smell, and you have hearing, and you have seeing, and you have speaking. Now, these four are very, very important portals, and because they're receivers. Now, if we take hearing, we can control what we want. We hear the wife talking or the man talking, and we can switch off because it's nagging. You say, hey, wait a minute, don't do that. Listen out for little signals. Listen out for little hints. The person is trying to tell you something. Listen, don't talk. We're told a very nice thing. You have two ears and one mouth. Listen to twice the amount you're talking. First of all, listen, hear it out, and then you can react to it. Don't ignore. I know it's annoying. I know it can be nagging. But in your mind, sing. It'll make you happy. Because it's not nagging. They are really, really concerned about it. And it's important. The other portal is your eyes. Now, we're told in the prayer, don't follow your eyes, don't follow your desires. Be very, very careful. We only look at our wife or our husband. But you know what? It's natural human nature. Everybody, when they sit with someone else, they size them up. It's natural. They undress them. Now you say, hey, wait a minute, but every single person does it whether they admit it or not. However, what you've got to do is guard your eyes. Don't stare. Don't put yourself in that situation. I was once working with a wealthy, very wealthy property owner in England, and he happened to be Haredi, very religious, the whole uniform. And I told him once that, in England, I was organizing a lot of meetings. I was organizing his whole estate, very, very large empire. And I told him that I've got such a good relationship with the bankers. They've invited, he and his wife has invited my wife and I. He was shocked. He says, "What are you doing?" So I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Look, your wife is precious and private. She's only for you. You know very well what happens to a man or a woman. They strip the other person in their mind. They have imaginations. It's human nature. Don't let them do that to your wife. Your wife is holy. She's kadosh. Don't do that." And I thought about it, and he was quite right. Because you see that happen so often. Your wife and husband are kadosh only to you. They're sanctified only to you, like temple property. You must be extremely careful, and you mustn't let that happen. Now, you might say, in this world, it's a bit far-fetched. But let me tell you, my wife and I went out with friends, also a boy and a girl, or a young man and woman, before we got married. And suddenly we saw the boy put his arm around her shoulder. So we looked at him, and he says, "I suppose I shouldn't have done that, right?" So my wife said a very clever thing. She says, "I want to tell you that. It's always, and it's a rule in life. If you show it, you don't have it. And if you have it, you don't show it. It's a very private thing between you and your husband and wife. It's very, very important to remember that. People don't take that seriously. But if you remember what desires every single person has, nobody is immune from it. King David wasn't immune, and Yehuda, the prince, wasn't immune, and so many other people weren't immune. Boaz was, and also Ruth. Everybody has that desire, and it's human nature, and we must think of it all the time. Because if we treat our wife or our husband as a precious thing, then they really become precious. And that is so powerful. Then you have the breathing. Now it says that Hashem formed man, and then he breathed into the man's nostrils. Now, it's very interesting. Neshama is soul. Nishmat Chayim is the breath of life. Now, we're told in the Talmud that the breath of life here means gave man and woman the power to speak, to think, to work things out. And so that put us all above the animal world. The apes and the monkeys that some people think we're descended from, good luck to them. But if we are, then it's developed and gradually they got a soul, but they got no soul. Yes, they can speak and make language, but how do they think? We've no idea. But they don't create, they don't work things out, they don't invent things. They're entirely different. And so we have to remember that is the power we've been given. However, when we die, there's no difference between an animal, a plant, or a human being, except it seems that with the animal and the plant, they die and go into the ground. The animal also turns to dust, and that's it. It's got no soul. It's got a nefesh. That's the living part of the soul, but no soul that will come back. But the flower or a twig from a tree, it drops off, but it has a seed inside, and it can grow to another tree and another tree. And the more twigs, that's why there's millions, if not hundreds of millions of roots and twigs on a tree. Look how many generations it could be. And the same thing, you remember with the butterfly? That butterfly in its cocoon, it was once like a worm, and it was crawling. Wasn't very pretty, and surprisingly enough, it seemed to have died, but it still had a seed inside. Gradually, that seed grew into a beautiful butterfly. Now make the mistake of opening it up beforehand, and you see just a gooey mess inside. Too early, you killed it. Shame, gone. But if you wait, you suddenly see there's activity inside. Kids like to open it up and take out the butterfly and help it. It's the worst thing you could have done, because the effort to come out, it makes it stronger and stronger and stronger, and then it is able to fly and be a beautiful butterfly and flying around the world. And the other thing is that this language of the soul, we're told by the Chabad Rebbe, Tanya. He says an important thing. How do souls communicate? Well, first of all, souls communicate by kissing. That's the language of a soul. You don't have to say a word, it's a feeling. It's an electricity, it's a wave in the air, it's a force, it's a power. No word, but it means a lot. And of course, the other one is the breathing together, the bonding together, the staying together. And that's also a very important reflection, connection, mind direction exercise. Breathing together in tandem whenever you've got tension in the house, in your marriage. This is part of conflict resolution. You have it with your children, you have it even with a friend. Sit down together and breathe in and breathe out in tandem. Breathe in and breathe out. You do it together in tandem. And you finally a bonding, a beautiful feeling coming over you. And you carry on like that 5 or 10 minutes. Each time there's a tension, you'll find there'll be a difference. Because you're near each other, you're breathing in each other's airs, it's the language of the soul. And you're bonding together. Now, this wave energy, we always have to have our radar up. And we have to watch out for the pain in the trigger word. Well, really happens with a soul. I like to share, and I've done this in other ways, what happened and how you search for a soul. Now, like any young man, when I was a young age, I ran youth centers all over England. And each time I used to be in charge of another center. One of the keys was to organize big functions like the JLE do, like TAL do, big functions, because the reason why people come is they want to meet a soulmate. They want to meet somebody, and usually have crowds of people. Well, of course, being a bachelor, I was also a candidate. And many girls did chase after me. But I was brought up in an age where you had friendship. It wasn't the platonic type, because although other girls thought, well, that's it, you have a girlfriend. It wasn't, because we never slept together. It was not, you didn't even enter your mind in those days. Oh yes, you had desires, but it just wasn't on. You respected the girl. You really were careful. And there was this girl, very beautiful, and we were friends. We had fun together, and she invited me to her house. And one day she said, look, it's all very well having this job. You don't earn that money because, they pay for your expenses and food. But otherwise, you're doing it because you really believe in what you're doing. She said, why don't you settle down? I knew exactly what she means. I said, well, I'm not ready yet. Well, her father called me in, and he says, look, we'll buy you a house, and we'll give you a job. He was a toy salesman, and he had his own areas. I'll get you an area. You'll make a good living, and you better have a lovely life together. And when I realized he meant business, I was off. I wasn't interested. And there were many, many times in life where I, as it were, was chosen. Not because I was necessarily handsome, but it was attraction that I was very popular. You have to be in that job, otherwise you can't succeed. And one after the other, we had such fun together. We went out together. It was great, but no more than that, even though a number offered themselves completely. But I would not cross that line. I only knew you only do it when you get married. That's it. Because I also knew, and I said it, it'll destroy me and it'll destroy you. Because the more you do it, it's like a drug. The more you want it and you can't resist. And I'm not going to marry love. I want to marry a soulmate. And I went to many, many countries. And I got to Singapore. And I was in France and it happened again there. It was fantastic. Fantastic. When I got to Singapore, I still had not decided to get married. I was 23, okay? But 23 to a principal of a school is quite something, and people respect it. Well, I ran a youth center there, organized the youth like I did everywhere in the world, and they all came to look for a husband and wife. It was always crowded. I taught them Israeli dancing. I taught them how to sing. I taught them KABBALAH and TORAH. I taught them the real life and what it means to be a Jew, and they never experienced that because they had not had a rabbi there for some 15 years. When I got there, I had to make a mass bar mitzvah. You know, a mass bar mitzvah with 15 boys. 15 boys, and some of them was old as 18 years. And they suddenly had a bar mitzvah. So you can imagine what I was dealing with here. And yes, everybody liked to learn with me, but my wife, she had decided to become religious. She came from a family who was very good, but they don't keep Shabbat, they don't keep anything. They'll have Friday night, they'll have the meals or the festival and go straight off to work or go out, and they weren't keeping it in the right way. She had made up her mind she was going to become religious. So she sat with me for hours and hours and hours. We learned together. And suddenly I felt, this is my soulmate. This is her real personality. And as it grew, I realized, well, I also knew that I had a window. 6 weeks and she's off to England. She was born in Iraq. She came to Australia where she was brought up in a completely irreligious boarding school. And then she came to see her father who was in Singapore. And then 6 weeks later, she's going. 6 weeks, that's all I had. We went out for 3 weeks. I wasn't going to take any chances. And I persuaded her to marry me. I married my soulmate, somebody I wanted to get old with. Now, it might sound romantic. However, it's so important, especially when it comes to people who are single mothers, people who suffer from all these problems. Marrying a soulmate is the most valuable thing that one can do in life. Don't blow it. Don't go and put yourself in a situation where you're marrying love and you're not marrying for love or for friendship. You're marrying love, and it never, ever lasts. And naturally, that is the bracha, the blessing I have to give each one of us. We should always be blessed with all of these things and the capability of bringing this all together. Because as you can see, it will resolve conflict in marriage. It will keep you from getting divorced if that's really your soulmate. Because it's very sad if you don't try and find a way to stay together. And also, you'll be able to find the right person for you in life and not live with the person you made a mistake. And it's not happy, it's not enjoyable after a time, and therefore that's the blessing I can give. You'll internalize, you'll self-hypnotize, you'll reflect, you'll connect, your mind direct, and become part of you. You should have a wonderful, wonderful, happy life. Thank you.
One question.
Yes.
In the talk, you said you were going to talk around a guaranteed way of meeting your soulmate with 40 days from the Kabbalah.
I just said that. If you follow all the rules in the Kabbalah, they guarantee you, if you follow all the rules, within 40 days you'll find your soulmate. Now, I want to tell you a little story about that. Thank you very much, Mark. That little story, which will add to the feeling. The problem is platonic. There was a girl in Golders Green, incidentally enough, but this story I heard was not from here. But there was also a girl like that. She was single, but every Friday night she'd make a Friday night table. Her and her friends would work hard to do it, and she loved inviting everybody. Of course, the single guys were crazy about her. They said, look, this is the type of wife that I want. But each one she was very kind to, and she had a platonic relationship with them. I don't think she went further than that. I've no idea. But so she came to a close friend of mine and said, tell me, what should I do? I can't find a soulmate. I'm helping everybody else, and I can't find my soulmate. So he said, listen very carefully. Stop. Stop. Because if you carry on like that, you're putting everybody off. They think you have soulmates. In fact, they're quite confused because you seem to have a number of them and they don't know what you do or don't do. That's not a good sign. It's not good for you. Stop now. So she stopped. And it was very, very hard for her. And of course, she prayed. And she was taught everything I'm teaching you now. And if she would have come to me, and many, many people do with this same problem, I would have taught her all the rules. She followed every single one. And within 40 days, it's true. One Friday afternoon, there's a knock at her door. And there's a very nice curly-haired young man. And he said, what time is the Friday night meal tonight? So she says, I've stopped. There is no Friday night meal. So he says, so what am I going to eat on Shabbat? What am I going to do? I really relied on this. I'm here from France, and what am I going to do? Well, she took a look at him, and she said, you know what? I'm invited to somebody else for Shabbat. You come with me. And they went together, and they continued to go together. And eventually, they found each other, and they became real soulmates and got married. And this is a true story, but I have 6 or 7 other cases that I've been dealing with that has been exactly the same. Mark, thank you for asking.
If it would be possible, could you summarize the rules just briefly when you say you follow?
You're quite right. You're quite right. Sorry about that. You're quite right, and I actually meant to, but I was watching the time very carefully, okay? But it's a question, so I can continue. Now, the first one is treat your wife like a princess. It's one-sided, yes, but she always dreamt of being a Cinderella and having a prince take her away on a white horse and give her a wonderful life. Now, there has to be caring and sharing 24/7. And life is like a mirror. In other words, it will reflect back on you. You are like that to her. She's number one and you're number two. Believe me, she'll treat you even more than a number one. And she will act more than a number two because a woman feels with all her emotions. Now, the next thing is keep your radar up. Watch out for difficulties. Watch out for tension. Watch out for sadness or worry or not relaxing. Watch out for pain. Watch out for the negativity. But also, look at the good things. She just got a new hair done and she's excited about it. Tell her, compliment her. She wants to hear these things. She got new clothes. Do the same thing. And listen out. And drop everything for her. It's very important. She has got to be, and she will be testing you all the time. I remember when I got married. So just before I got married, I had a beard. Alice loved the beard. But I knew she was testing me. So before the marriage, she says, I want you to take it off. I did. I come there, she strokes my face and says, where's my Eli? Where's Eliyahu? I can't see him. And she made me grow that beard. I passed the test, but I knew it was a test. So why not make her feel good? Because if you're not willing to do that, then you're not showing you're caring, because that's what she needs. The next point is have fun. Have fun all the time. And your marriage, you have to enjoy a frank, open sexual relationship. Tell you about your wants and desires and the things you don't like and which you don't want. And make yourself happy, enjoy it. As I said, it's a bracha, it's a blessing in it of itself, because there is no blessing. Most things you say for what we're about to receive. We don't say that. And the more fun and enjoyable it is, the more blessings it brings. and that puts you together. The next one was paint a picture. Now, painting a picture, you have to dream to be able to see the soul. You paint a picture in your mind of you already being married and who you're married to. And you have to have that picture. And make sure you have that picture fixed in the mind, but be very careful. She doesn't have to be only beautiful and attractive and something really attractive to you, but she also has to have a soul. But look in the mirror and see, well, you might not be attractive, or maybe you are, but how do you look? Can you see your soul? And you have to work on it. Now, and I told you the story about the 2 glasses of tea, which showed who she really was. Now, and then I told you afterwards that story, which, it's all self-hypnosis to internalize what to look out for. And then the next one, which is very important, you need 2 faces. You must know your needs in your marriage is those 2 faces, the inner one, the outer one. Keep the anger inside, don't show it. Keep the love outside, show that. Just be quiet, not only to your wife, but also to friends. Weigh out what you're going to say. Now, you might say, well, that's a bit false because I'm showing on the outside what I'm not really feeling in the inside. Oh, no. Because as I reminded you, Maimonides, Rambam said, Tocho kavaro. He said, the inside becomes what you're showing on the outside. Don't wait until you're ready. I'm not in love. How many people in the traditional world who have the largest percentage of successful marriages, how many people have divorces at a very, very low rate? And if they do have problems, it gets sorted out in the way I told you. There was a psychological study that what happens is they researched on happy marriages and challenging marriages. And it's interesting. At the end, they found they both had the same challenges. The secret was how you dealt with them. So you have to remember to internalize that it should be part of you, but take your time, reflect, and then connect to whatever is going on and mind direct towards your partner and think of this all the time. Now, platonic friends, be very, very careful. We're living in a world, and also even in my younger days, where most of religious people did not behave that way. They thought that way, but they never behaved that way. But platonic is now the full thing. They move in together, but they're in love with love. Technically, they're married, actually, without realizing it. But when they do, they're married love. So they've got a friend, they've got satisfaction, they don't need anything. So they don't look for other friends. They don't give themselves a chance. They'll never, ever find their soulmate this way. And how can you grow old with a person? In many, many of these cases, I remember I advised some of the people who have suffered from this, single mothers, and they had a conflict. They had 2 different boyfriends. One she liked a lot, and the other one she liked a lot, and she didn't know what to do. So I said, you go and choose the one you want to grow old with. That's all. So she chose actually the one most unlikely. Less handsome, but she was the one really that she wanted to grow old with. And he treated her so nicely. And it was successful. And so it has to be with us. We only want to get married to our soulmate. Otherwise, we destroy ourselves. And in that ego, when she starts getting children, the children need parents. And the children are smart, even at a very young age. They can see the conflict between how their parents behave and how they tell them what to do. And it's a terrible thing if that child grows up and won't get married for that very reason, or doesn't have confidence in themselves. None of us really want to. That's not being a parent. It's not being just a biological parent. But it's more in our DNA, the DNA of the grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and all the generations in the previous visits to this earth where the soul lived again. That's what it means. So you're not giving them parents. And because the mother is giving a lot of love, it affects his ego, and he goes and finds another princess. Or she gets nervous and realizes it. You might say to me, well, breathe together, bond together, stay together. So how does that work? Look, women are very sensitive, mainly women, men are also. She knows and feels that while he's breathing together, they're not bonding together. He's breathing with somebody else who's got somebody else in his mind or somebody else in her mind. And you know, that happens a lot. In real life, sometimes in our own. Thank God it's not happened to me. I'm very lucky. I married my soulmate. And so what happens is, gradually they're not bonding together. And she feels it, or he feels it. And he's got to be very frank and say, look, this is what's happening. Let's discuss it. Why? And if it's only a question of ego, if they don't overdo the ego, you have a chance to fix the marriage. Now, we have the now Hashem. At the moment you haven't got a soulmate, so who's your soulmate? Hashem. Love Hashem. Attach yourself to Hashem. And it's Hashem who announces 40 days before a baby is born who is going to marry who. But only Hashem knows. Freedom of choice involved here? Yes. You can always decide to choose somebody on the looks, choose somebody because of desire, and that's it. And you live together, and you made your choice. Hashem won't interfere because you're not ready yet. You're not ready at all. Now, so Hashem looks out for you when you are ready and changed yourselves, and that's where we came into the next point. You have to be alive and you have to have dignity. You have to start behaving as if you're already married in your mind. You have to pray for that partner. You have to think of that partner. You have to be proud of that partner. You have to encourage that partner in your mind because they're going through all sorts of emotions. And after a time, you actually start to feel it. It's like mental telepathy. You actually start to feel it. Because when you're married, many, many times the husband or wife could be far away, but you do feel each other, especially Friday night when you light the candles. You actually feel this. Should be at home, it's better, but you feel it. And that's so important. That's why a woman is given the task of lighting the candle, because she's the light in your life, and she brings light into your life. She is all the light. And we have to think of that all the time. It's very powerful. And that's far better than marrying somebody who is not a soulmate. Now, what about dignity? Well, the dignity is you have to be frank and open. You have to tell them what you need, what your trigger points are. And I gave you the two examples. One is when you're a little girl or a little boy and you did something wrong, or they didn't like what you did, or you didn't do something and you were still blamed. So they would be angry with you and would not show any love. They'd never say to you, look, we don't like what you do, but we still love you. So a lot of children don't feel the love is there. And so they cut you out of their lives. And there are so many people who I used to go with a good friend of mine who ran an organization, Big Brother in Israel. Thousands of kids that were helping. And the Big Brother used to give them money. They were mainly volunteers, but he still used to help them with money in their studies. And they would either be the Big Brother to a kid who was on the edge of being thrown out of school because the teachers can't take it. They've got enough to handle the school. And if somebody's negative or disturbs, they've got to get them out. And so he went around, and there were thousands of kids that he managed to keep at school and build up their lives. And he used to go 3 times a week to a pub. That was a very religious man, sounds strange. And one night he took me, and I spent the whole night with him. And here we were sitting 3 o'clock in the morning. And they were full of a lot of people, and he went from table to table. And he says, why are you here? What goes on in your life? What do you do? And nobody had ever done that. Nobody had ever asked them. Nobody had ever taken an interest. And they'd pour out his heart to them. And he'd take an interest. And he'd see them again and again. We come here to be consoled by our friends. We're all in the same position. Nowhere to go to. We left home because there was no love, no understanding. and it was impossible, and we were discouraged. And we are discouraged. Well, this wonderful man, together with the local municipality, set up a number of homes, like foster homes. He put in a mother and father who would act as parents to everybody there. And they would be welcomed in. They could stay there overnight or a few nights until they find their way. And many of them stayed for quite some time. They had a clean bed, they had good food, they had love, they had happiness, they had recognition, and that they helped them to build up their lives and make something of their life, whether it's carrying on studying or whether it's going up and building up a career and getting a job. But they were all helped, and an enormous number of people helped, and that was a very beautiful thing. So that's what is important, is how you do it and what you handle. So it's got to be with dignity. Always be frank, tell your spouse what you like and what you dislike in the things they do or they say. What are your trigger words? And I gave you that one example of trigger words, which has a very, very deep effect. And then there's the code embedded in the Zohar. If you remember the three types of people, one is a vessel who is alive but dead, wants to only receive knowledge, time, etc. for himself alone, and therefore doesn't want to give. You don't want that person in your life because you will not be able to deal with them and you can't fix them. Don't imagine that you can. They're on their own unless they really change, and that's very, very rare because it's in their personality, which they've inherited. It's in their DNA. And to stop it, it's difficult. But by the way, they came back here into this world in order to repair these things. But it's not for you to try to fix because you'll suffer. And then there's a person who's alive but sick. Alive but sick means he gives in order to receive. He's got an ego. And he gives more and more time and money, etc. until he's got enough, but he gives nothing in return. And that's not a life to live. You can't have friends like that. You can't have business partners like that. You can't live with them. But the ideal soulmate is somebody that only wants to receive. He's alive and alive. Alive and alive is the code in the Zohar, which means he wants to receive in order to give. So he's a vessel to receive. He'll keep receiving more time, more knowledge, more loving, more sharing, more caring. And all he wants to do is to give it to other people. That's a very, very good soul. And we have to watch for that. Don't suddenly be in the business of helping people to repent. You can't afford that unless that's your job and you decided in life you're going to do that. But it's a very, very difficult task and it's not all that rewarding. It is rewarding when you're successful. I mean, I work on that. That mine is outreach, which is very important. But I'm also helping other people who want to receive and give and care. That makes me feel much better because then they help other people. And that's the soulmate that you want to try to find. You put all of this together and you put it with the four senses. Smell test and the smell, the eyes, the ears, and the other portal is speaking. And I started off, I said, hear, listen first, use your ears twice as much as your mouth. Listen to twice as much as what you say. Listen in silence. Don't get angry. Have patience. When they finished, then you know what to say. You know how to deal with them. You know how to make them feel good. It's important. If they've got to worry, if they're sad, if they're in pain, if they're uncomfortable, if they're nervous, if they're happy, all these are important radar signals. You have to download them. You have to watch out for them. And you have to feel them for that other person. And then you have the seeing. Don't follow after your hearts. It's a natural tendency and nobody can deny it. Every man and woman or girl or boy sit together and they're already stripping that person. They want to see what they look like. It's a terrible thing to think of, but it's human nature. Everybody does that. But it's only a desire to test you and make you stronger to fight against it. So don't follow after your eyes. Be careful what you look at and who you look at and where you go to look at it. And then you have smell and your breathing. The breathing is the neshama, the soul. It's the same word. We had the breath of life. The breath of life is the power to see, to think, to speak, and to understand and create, and to be the human being that we know that we are, and we have to work on it. And then there's the language of the soul, the kissing, which is an electric force, a power, a wave that you absorb and you feel each other without saying. How often you can sit with somebody and breathe together and you feel bonded without touching each other. And then love is only an expression of your friendship and that feeling. Because unfortunately they use the word making love. Making love means you're making love. It's not for real. It's a game. You're enjoying it, but it's not for real. It's not deep. It's not everlasting. Don't get pulled into that trap. Be very, very careful. And of course, the breathing together, bonding together, and staying together. As I told you, it happens with everybody. Universities, friends, schools, army. People bond together and it lasts a lifetime. People do anything for each other. And you solve your conflicts in your family by breathing together, bonding together, staying together. And we finish lastly with that problem in your mind that is an automatic thing. How come with the breathing together the marriage breaks up? It's because there was no bonding together. You can feel that breathing together in tandem. You feel it. A woman especially feels it. That this is not in tandem. Something's wrong. Something's missing. You have to be frank with yourself and with them. You either ask them what's going on and why, and then you can explain, look, what do you expect? I still love you very much. Nothing changed. He says, I'm in pain. I'm nervous. I don't know what to do. I'm sad. You have to understand that. So once you know those trigger points, you do something about it. You don't do something about it. You still have your ego. Then it's gone. And the other thing is for you to be real with yourself. Realize if that's the truth, you tried to speak, it's not working, then make your other life. You have to know and you get out of it. You get out of it as fast as you can. It's good for you and it's very good for the children. And pray that you'll find another soulmate. And when you put all that together and you concentrate on all of these rules, then as I said, the Kabbalah says, within 40 days, Hashem will say you're ready to receive your soulmate because you made all those changes as if you're already married. And you live and you think of them all the time. And you care. And you're proud. And if it's done both of you, what a wonderful, loving relationship. You're already built up. And so Hashem says, you're ready. I'll introduce you. And it's the other way around. If you look in the mirror and you examine yourself, who you really want, what you're looking for. And I gave you the two examples, many examples of one of the 2 cups of teas. She understood him. Therefore, they were soulmates automatically. So Hashem said, you're both ready. I'm going to bring you together. And I gave you the example, which I won't go into again, but I've seen happen so many times. If you have a platonic relationship, which is the most dangerous thing, either the others think that you already have somebody in your life and that they can't compete, or you really have a full sexual relationship where you're living together and therefore you have no need. You're not looking for friends and it has the same effect on you. You have to make those changes. If you make those changes, you let into your life the person who you want to grow old with. And as soon as Hashem sees that, the person that was chosen for you, you get. That's why I said freedom of choice. That is freedom of choice. Freedom of choice is you choose to make the change or you choose not to make the change. You choose to live with the right soulmate, or you choose to walk away. Thank you for asking the question. Share it and enjoy it and internalize it. Have a wonderful day.